Hello everyone and welcome to the first full DLC speculation video post-launch of Jurassic World Evolution 3. And instead of covering just the DLC ideas, we're going to also cover what could come in the updates alongside them. And throughout the year, as we are receiving one returning species a month, with 8 of the 12 months being base game species, and the slots that align with DLC releases should have a returning DLC species from the previous game. And that would be a great way of bringing those animals back, but also getting the base game animals in alongside them. So another thing that I'll include here is the species in the first update after a DLC is a species that would get an alternative variant alongside it. So there are many creatures from the last game that didn't exactly have the best designs, and not just me saying this, there's been several people in the community who have voiced disagreement against how certain animals were designed, and so we're going to go over a few of those. But without further ado, let's get into it, because we have a lot of DLCs to cover as we are going from 2026 to 2028, which is something I did for I think Jurassic World Evolution 2 and also Planet Zoo, so we're going to do the same thing here. So the January update would be rather small, but feature an animal that has great potential, the Ouranosaurus. This species would arrive with, of course, sexual dimorphism and juveniles, but also its Camp Cretaceous variant, of which would grant the Ouranosaurus as a whole the ability to swim in deep water, as we see in Camp Cretaceous that they are powerful swimmers. But these smaller updates don't come without improvements. One in particular that I think about it is a proper intervention mechanic. So when a predator tries to attack a juvenile when the parent is nearby, the parent immediately steps in and attacks the threat, with even hadrosaurs and sauropods running in and possibly just shoving the predator to deter it. And even in social species, a mobbing behavior would be cool, such as in ornithomimids or Pachycephalosaurus, standing together as the young run behind and do their intimidation displays to get that predator away. Also, another thing being the pterosaur nest should be able to be placed outside of an aviary with no problem whatsoever, so that those creating ecosystems have less of a hassle when trying to have pterosaurs naturally breed. Also having it that the aviary hatchery can be placed outside the hatchery so that the release process is much faster and more efficient for pterosaurs in said ecosystems would be a really good change as well. The February update is one that I think is a good opportunity to introduce the Majungasaurus ahead of what I think will be the first DLC of 2026. But this update could also arrive with potentially the addition of giving Ostroraptor the ability to swim, as it is a little strange that Pyroraptor, an animal that we know definitely didn't swim as gracefully as it did in Dominion, can swim, and the Ostroraptor, a wetland dromaeosaur, can't. Another improvement could be giving sauropods minor defensive abilities when being hunted, with some species using their long tails to bat the predator away or deliver a kick that deters the hunter from attacking. These minor moves are a good starting point to make sauropods a more formidable prey item, as these defenses would deal serious damage to attackers. And now we get to the first DLC, the Chaos Theory DLC, which should release probably late March, and would only have one new species in the Beckel Spinax, which would arrive with 2 skins for Blonde and Brunette, the 2 individuals seen on screen. But this pack would also introduce new variants for Pachyrhinosaurus, Majungasaurus, and Suchomimus. There would also be several skins like the Leucistic Baryonyx, Geva the Gallimimus, Smoothie the Baby Ankylosaurus, the Biosinotrosiraptors, Camp Cretaceous Stegosaurus skins, Major and Minor the Majungasauruses, 1 Pachyrhinosaurus skin, 3 Suchomimus skins, the Manticore Velociraptor, Blind-Eyed Allosaurus, Grey Ceratosaurus, Pink-Frilled Dilos, and maybe a bonus Camp Cretaceous Spinosaurus skin as well. I think a good repeating pattern for DLC updates should be that a DLC animal from the previous game is released as part of the update, and as Pachyrhinosaurus is a DLC dinosaur and is in Chaos Theory, it would only make sense to make it the returning species. Following this, a major thing I think this update should do is revise the dimorphism of canon species, particularly those with canonical dimorphism such as the Nasutoceratops that especially needs it, as well as the T-Rex and Parasaurolophus. But the major revision comes with the fact that females should have the same models as they did in the previous game, as those were supposed to be females of those species. Adding dimorphism for existing variants as well should be included too. And as not many of them would require drastic changes, it would be good to have a bit there, as well as certain animals like Giganotosaurus, Allosaurus and Dreadnoughtus having juveniles that better reflect the adult versions of their JWE variants, with the JWE Allosaurus variants having a juvenile that resembles the one seen on screen with a 2018 skin for both adult and juvenile. Also allowing for non-specific skins that were not assigned to unique individuals that were of a specific sex should be able to be used as skins, such as the Dominion Dilo, Quetzalcoatlus, Oviraptor, Moros and more, on both male and female. Also allowing for canon skins to appear on the baby model as well would allow for players to better recreate scenes and correctly identify which individual should mature with that skin. Next is one that I and many have requested, and that is a redesign of the Dilophosaurus, a species that hasn't been as well translated from film to game as others. The new Dilophosaurus should have a more accurate skull shape to the maquette that was used for the Jurassic Park film, with a very serpentine feel to it. No more of the T-Rex like boxy head, and the current one's eyes should be slightly darkened, and as the eyes would be, they're too bright on the original model. The model should also get an updated posture, holding its tail up and off the ground. The frill too should be corrected to have more detail around the membrane and more accurate patterning to what is seen on screen. This update could also arrive with the Dilophosaurus 1993 skin, as it is one of the only dinosaurs from the original film that doesn't have a dedicated film accurate skin. And finally, as Season 4 of Chaos Theory is set in Bison Valley, the return of the original Bison Sanctuary map from Evolution 2 would be great, but with it of course being updated to incorporate the running river with the deep water tool, and so expanding the buildable area of the valley. The main Bison compound should also be fully functional, as we got a lot more insight into how it works in Chaos Theory, and so we should be able to open the gate and house dinosaurs within it. This in turn should also allow the dinosaurs to be able to access the main courtyard, as seen in both Chaos Theory and Jurassic World Dominion. With the return of this map, the bison-specific foliage should also return, bringing with it the atmospheric mist that it possesses. As well as this, the Bison Research Outpost should also return, being fully functional and able to be placed throughout our parks. The last thing is the return of the Bumpy skin, as it was cut from the base game, and as Smoothie skin would likely be included in this DLC, it makes sense for his mother to also return to the game. The April update is one that I am excited for, mostly as I've chosen quite a good species to introduce here, the Liopleurodon. Now, the evolution design is very much crocodile inspired, but similar to how Frontier handled the additional Deinonychus variant with the release of Evolution 3, giving the Leo a second variant that isn't 100% accurate and retains much of the animal's character would be a good step. Having more accurate but slightly retrified Liopleurodon design would be my preferred outcome, potentially taking inspiration from the Walking with Dinosaurs design, which honestly would be really cool. And another thing as part of this update would be updating the Dominion Allosaurus and Giganotosaurus models to lack scars outside of these specific skins, as well as also having a scarless variation of the Carnotaurus 2022 and the Tyrannosaurus Rex 2022 skins. And also adding a blind Therizinosaurus skin as well would allow players to better recreate Jurassic World Dominion. As the next DLC after this update is a franchise title, I thought it was only fitting that the May update would contain the animal named after the man that started it all, the Crichtonsaurus, one of the best ankylosaurs in the game, and named after the Jurassic Park author, Michael Crichton. And it is a species I would like to see sooner rather than later, compared to many of the other base game animals. Also, following the Chaos Theory DLC, ornithomimids like Gallimimus could be given the ability to fight back against small carnivores, kicking and pecking any animal that tries to hunt them, and it would be best if it wasn't a prolonged battle, more of a quick scrap and then a winner is decided or the predator retreats instead, and both animals could survive in the encounter if the retreat occurs. But yeah, we see Geba, the Gallimimus in Chaos Theory Season 2, face off against Red, the Atrociraptor, and he properly fights back, so seeing that sort of thing in Evolution 3 would really make the ornithomimids stand out. And now we get to the biggest DLC of probably Jurassic World Evolution 3's whole lifespan, the Jurassic World Rebirth expansion, and this would be the first major DLC for the game, first expansion, adding 4 new species and 4 new variants with a few different skins as well. For new species, we have the 2 hybrids of Distortus Rex and the Mutadon. The Distortus Rex would be made using Tyrannosaurus Rex and possibly Titanosaurus as well. Mutadon would be created using the DNA of Velociraptor and Pteranodon. Then we have 2 dinosaurs with Aqualops and the Titanosaurus. The 4 variants are Spinosaurus 2027, Mosasaurus 2027, Quetzalcoatlus 2027, and Tyrannosaurus Rex 2027, all of which having skins that reflect what is seen on screen, with the Spinosaurus having 4 skins and Titanosaurus having both a male and a female skin. Skins for other species in the pack would be Velociraptor 2027 for both male and female raptors, Compsognathus 2027 and Dilophosaurus 2027, as well as the same for T-Rex, Mosasaurus, Quetzalcoatlus and Dolores, and probably the D-Rex and Mutadon as well. So yeah. As well as these animals, the DLC would also contain various building pieces, vehicle skins and a campaign inspired by the Jurassic World Rebirth film, as well as a new map, Isla St. Hubert, for the player to explore and for these mysterious species to inhabit. The island itself would be dotted with several limestone mountains indicative of the Southeast Asian landscape that Rebirth was filmed in, as well as also possessing a natural lagoon that extends for a large area of the island's southern shoreline, which would be inhabited by the Mosasaurus and Spinosaurus during the campaign. This update would be quite substantial and introduce a major new mechanic, as well as a returning DLC species and improvements to some Jurassic Park species. The first thing is the returning species, which I have selected to be the Archelon, as it would fit well with a big new mechanic for this update, and it has been a common wish for lagoon species and land creatures to be able to interact, and so with Rebirth in particular showcasing Spino and Mosasaurus sharing the same environment, I thought a natural shoreline attachment to the edge of the lagoon that allows animals like Archelon and the Spinosaurs to enter and exit the lagoon, while still being able to move around and interact with land species, as the shore sort of acts as a bridge between the lagoon and the land, and so animals are able to move freely across both. And so basically it would allow for any animals that want to investigate the shore and the water at the edge of it to be potentially taken by a marine predator. The other improvements come in the form of variants for existing Jurassic Park species, namely the Mamenchisaurus, which would receive an accurate Lost World variant with a skin, and the Lost World Pteranodon, which would also be a variant with a skin. The Jurassic Park Parasaurolophus should also be implemented with the skin inspired by those seen on the mural in the Visitor Center, and I also feel Ceratosaurus should also get a Jurassic Park variant, as the one we have doesn't quite match with the one seen on screen, and with it given an accurate skin too. Other species that could be given franchise skins are Corythosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Compy, Spino, and the male Parasaurolophus from the Lost World should also receive film-specific skins. The 1993 Triceratops should also be made into a variant, as the model is too distinct from the other Triceratops to be left as a skin. And then we have the lowland and highland Velociraptors of Isla Sorna, both of which having different morphologies from the Jurassic World Velociraptor, and so both are worth being turned into variants instead, with the 1993 Velociraptor being placed under lowland Velociraptor, as both share the same morphology, just different coloration. And then lastly, we have Tyrannosaurus Rex being given the ability to swim, and aggressive swimming species able to attack the Cretaceous crews as well. The T-Rex in particular would run along the bottom of the deep water, much like a modern hippopotamus, following the boat until it reaches shallow water, in which it would flip the kayak and proceed to eat any guests that fall out. But yeah, it would be a great way to try and recreate the scene in Jurassic World Rebirth. Another species that could receive an alternate variant is Sciarodactylus, a species from the Jurassic Park novel, but its design in-game doesn't reflect the real animal as well as it could. Some community art gives an idea on what Sciarodactylus could look like, with a coat of pycnofibers, a crestless head, and crestless beak that is a little shorter and full of more teeth. I think getting a design like this would make for a great alternate variant for the animal. And a bonus feature in this update should be changing the diets of Tapijara and Kiowa to being frugivorous, feeding on the paleobotany plants such as the tall nut, ginkgo and cycads, where they could land on the trees and eat from the branches, or potentially just eat any fallen fruit at the base of the tree. August could bring the Pentaceratops, one of the game's larger ceratopsians and one I look forward to seeing return. I particularly wish for the male to, instead of having a larger frill, like what has been done with most of the current ceratopsians, looking at you Triceratops, instead being made a bit wider and adding some vivid patterns that would improve the frill shape in my opinion. And the main feature for this update would be the species that just currently drop if they've lost a fight should be given proper finishing animations, because it's rather lackluster when a giant creature like Therizinosaurus loses to a predator and is just knocked over, rather than being brought to the ground and finished off in the same manner as most other dinosaurs in the game. So that would be a change I would like to see. I think the last two DLCs I've got here for 2026 could become my favourites of the year, particularly this one, the Asian Species Pack. This pack doesn't include scenery, as we already have a dedicated Asian scenery set, and so getting a diverse range of Asian animals instead I think is more worthwhile. The first being the Shantungosaurus, an impressive and enormous hadrosaur that is often depicted as being some really powerful prey for any predator to try and take on. And hopefully the complementary update could make that happen. Next is the feathered Microraptor, a dromaeosaur capable of powered flight with 5 distinct sets of flight feathers, 2 on the arms, 2 on the legs, and 1 on the tail. This species would make a great addition to the aviaries and could potentially be released via the hatchery as well. And what would make the species stand out would be the ability to climb up and soar between the placeable trees, which would really grant this species some unique behaviours. Thirdly, we have Yangchuanosaurus, the largest carnivore in Asia during the late Jurassic, and a formidable metriacanthosaurid theropod that would pose a threat to many of the Asian stegosaurs. And our next animal, the Shunosaurus, a medium-sized sauropod known for its clubbed tail, a powerful weapon that this animal could use against attackers. This update includes a free returning DLC species from the last game, the ever-popular Gigantoraptor, the largest of the Oviraptorosaurs, but outside of this animal, this update will be largely animal-focused, particularly in regards to animal combat. As the Asian Species Pack features 2 species well known for their combative traits, I think it is only fitting that this will be the update that allows sauropods and hadrosaurs to properly fight other species, and even members of their own kind. When battling their own, sauropods would wrestle one another, using their powerful necks and chests, as well as occasionally kicking with their forelimbs and biting their opponent. Some species would rock back on their hind legs to slam down into opponents, and even use this technique for intimidating predators, making themselves appear more dangerous and give themselves a height advantage. Sauropods would be able to use their jaws to throw off pack hunting animals from their flanks, and also be able to use their necks and tails to bat away opponents. For the hadrosaurs, they would deliver fierce kicks, bites and headbutts that could fatally injure any predator not suited for bringing down such an animal as Edmontosaurus. A battle with a carnivore could even be more of a tackle, taking place much like a regular hunt but not being dragged out and being rather quick. Another good feature for this pack, or this update, would be allowing players to release juveniles of every species from the hatchery rather than having to breed the animals first. This could potentially allow for us to have babies of each of the hybrids too. October could give us one of the most requested redesigns, that being for the Camarasaurus, introducing a variant with more realistic proportions, particularly a more well-muscled neck, more accurate feet, a longer tail, a more sloped back, and a more accurate skull shape and face. This would really improve the species and make it much more attractive as a choice for sauropod enclosures. Another highly requested animal that would be great to reintroduce close to Christmas is the Antarctic Cryolophosaurus with its distinct crest and proportions. It would be fantastic for this animal to return to the roster as it is our only Antarctic species. The final pack of the year is also one of my favourites, as I think it would be a good idea to end the year on a high, and so we have the Coastal Pack, a pack including animals from the coastlines of the prehistoric planet. The first species is easily the most requested. The Deinosuchus, a massive crocodiliform that would have been fully capable of dragging various dinosaurs to their doom. Easily one of the most unique animals in the pack, this great beast would utilise the shoreline attachment to the lagoons introduced back in the Rebirth update, allowing it to venture into deeper water of of lagoons, but also inhabit the deep water of enclosures, where it can ambush drinking dinosaurs from below the surface. This species would be one of the most dynamic, not fighting animals in the traditional sense of the game, rather hunting them, hunting other animals, and being hunted by much larger predators such as the Megalodon or Mosasaurus. Many of its interactions would take place in water, as they do with modern crocodilians, socializing, feeding, occasionally resting, and of course hunting in the water. The second animal is Rhamphorhynchus, a pterosaur from Jurassic Europe that we have quite a good understanding of, and a species that would expand that small pterosaur niche. And this species was well adapted for hunting fish and could introduce a brand new behaviour that I will go into a bit later. The third and final species is the Cretaceous bony fish Zophactinus, a predatory fish up to 20 feet long that is known for swallowing its prey whole behind a line of sharp teeth. If the devil kept fish, this would certainly be one of them. But this species would be able to thrive alongside other species from the Western Interior Seaway, such as the Archelon and Elasmosaurus. It is also known to be a cannibal, so keep an eye on the individuals in the lagoon, as some may disappear. This pack would also contain various coastal scenery pieces, such as boats, cranes, jetty pieces, life rings, netting, marine animal fossils, and potentially skeletal pieces, such as a mosasaur skeleton or megalodon jaws. This update paired with the DLC is probably one of my favourites from this entire video. The returning DLC species is Camp Cretaceous' own Nothosaurus, a Triassic reptile that would be sure to make use of the shoreline attachment from the Rebirth update. The second feature is giving multiple depths to the deep water brush, to make it so that some semi-aquatic animals can dive in the water. Not all should, as not every animal that can swim can dive. These would be species like the Dinosaurs, Nothosaurus, Archelon, Spinosaurus, Suchomimus, Irritator, Baryonyx, and Pyroraptor. These depths should also be placeable in aviaries, allowing pterosaurs like Geosternbergia, Pteranodon, Dimorphodon, Tropignathus, Sciarodactylus, and the new Rhamphorhynchus in this pack to dive into the water to catch live fish in a more natural way. However, this would also cause pterosaurs to be tempted by the bountiful fish in the lagoons, as I think a new fish shoal would be a cool new addition to the lagoons, perhaps even a live shark feeder, with a shark that swims around freely. This shoal would attract pterosaurs to feed on the fish, while also creating a feast for many of the other animals in the lagoon, such as ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and the Zophactinus. However, this has one drawback for the pterosaurs, as when they try to exit the water, they are at risk of being caught by large predators, such as the Zophactinus, Mosasaurus, Kronosaurus, Dunkleosteus, Megalodon, and the Dinosuchus. This water improvement could also come with a muddy water tab that has both shallow and deep water varieties. The water would also have visible fish present swimming through it, as the fish appearing out of thin air sort of breaks the immersion a bit. The next features are specific to a few franchise species, namely the Carnotaurus, Apatosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus rex, all of which should be given more faithful models to what is seen on screen. With a poll I put out on the channel a couple of weeks ago regarding the T-Rex, resulting in the animatronic skull shape being the preferred choice, and so that would be, at least for the Jurassic Park skins, the best option, as I personally think that the Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex skull shape would be better for just the base model of the animal and also the Jurassic World skins. The Carnotaurus would be made a bit bulkier, have a bit more of an accurate head to what is seen on screen, and smaller, more curved horns than it does currently. The Apatosaurus would have an updated head, longer legs, and a more muscular build than it currently does. Dimorphodon 2 should also receive an update, with the adults having pycnofibers on their backs, brighter eyes, much like what the juvenile possesses. And the Jurassic World species should also receive movie skins inspired by the films they were in, such as T-Rex 2015, Carnotaurus 2018, and Apatosaurus 2015 and 18, and so on. Mosasaurus 2 requires an update, and it's one that I and many others have noticed ever since Jurassic World Evolution 2, that being the random red osteoderms that line its back in the game. The Jurassic World Mosasaurus does not have these, and they are very distracting on the animal when trying to recreate Jurassic World, or even just have a Mosasaurus in the park in general. Perhaps it could be something exclusive to the male and the female lacks it. I think that would be good dimorphism. Some semi-aquatic social interactions would also be good additions for various of the swimming species, And the final feature for this update should be a natural lagoon tab on the island generator, allowing players to have one or more natural lagoons varying in shape and size around their islands. It would be a really cool feature that would allow for more diverse islands to be created and have the lagoon species in a much more natural setting. Now moving on to 2027, we kick the year off with the return of Amargasaurus, a fan favourite sauropod species from South America, and it is one of the Jurassic World Evolution 2 species that players have wanted an alternative variant for being one that is a bit more elegant, has a more naturalistic face, and also the colourful membrane stretched between its neural spines, something that could be dynamic and could even be folded down and then erected when wanting to display, sort of similar to how the sails of the Titanosaurus from Rebirth work. A small update could be for the marine reptiles, for when they surface, they take a breath, as what they do currently makes it seem like they do not breathe at all. Another South American species is the Marodactylus, the final member of the Romualdo Formation's pterosaurs from the Jurassic World Evolution 2 roster, and the more accurate of the two ornithochirids, and it would be a great inclusion here, especially considering both of these are a tease for what is next. A great first DLC I would love to see introduced in 2027 is a South American species pack, including 4 highly requested species, such as the terrifying Mape, with its huge claws making it more than a match for most prey. Then we have the Argentinosaurus, one of the largest of the titanosaurs, up there with the Patagotitan as one of the largest dinosaurs ever discovered. The recently discovered Stegosaurus is an ankylosaurian, known for its distinct tail, which is bony like that of an ankylosaur, but with sharp modified osteoderms that resemble the Thagomizer of a stegosaur. The final species is the bizarre Pterodostro, a goose-sized pterosaur from early Cretaceous Brazil, well known for its modified teeth that have evolved to become a sieve that filter small organisms from the water, much like the baleen of a humpback whale. The species I have selected for this free update is the Sinosauropteryx, the red panda dinosaur basically, small, adorable, and has bands on its long tail. It would be a great DLC species to see return, as it certainly had some of the most charming animations in the previous game. And I already know that the juveniles will be heartbreakingly adorable. One very popular request is the novel Dilophosaurus, with it being a much larger and deadlier variant than the movie Dilophosaurus, and would certainly be great to see added into the game. This update could also introduce pack hunting for the Utahraptor, as of all the dromaeosaurs in the game, the behaviour makes more sense for the Utahraptor to display. And adding another variant in the form of the Dominion Parasaurolophus would also be fantastic, as this design is very much distinct from the base para, and it would be great to have multiple patterns, with the male having the thick stripes across the back, as you can see in the front, and then the female with that classic Jurassic Park pattern, as you can see on the individual on the right. Another marine species I would like to see receive an alternate variant is the Tylosaurus, which possesses a rather gnarly jaw. But this species does have a few accurate features, such as the tail fluke, but I feel like a variant that is slightly more retro-esque but also containing a lot of accurate features, such as more rounded fins, a sort of partial fluke for the tail, and of course a less gnarly face would be perfect. In May, the return of another novel species in the Euoplocephalus, one of the best ankylosaurs from the previous games, and certainly one of my favourites. Possibly one of the 2 expansions that I'm most excited to see is the Cenozoic expansion, a DLC that I think needs to happen in this game, as we do have the Megalodon. And Cenozoic animals are a mysterious corner of the franchise that hasn't been extensively explored, whether it be in this game or just in the films in general. Unlike any expansion before, this DLC has no non-avian dinosaurs, as well as also not having any variants of previous franchise species. But given the caliber of the Rebirth expansion having pretty much 8 individual species, I think it would be just right to have the Cenozoic expansion have a similar number. But this would also be a Frontier original once again, with an original campaign mission and some new maps perhaps set in Patagonia and eastern Siberia. This pack will deliver 8 individual species: the magnificent Smilodon, the woolly mammoth, Megatherium, Kalenkin, Basilosaurus, Argentavis, there we go, Elasmotherium and Paraceratherium, all filling the roles of many of the Mesozoic species, with the Basilosaurus in particular being the mammalian equivalent of a mosasaurus. Various scenery pieces would be part of this pack, with various Ice Age props such as mammoth tusks, animal hide, skulls, bones, cave paintings, blocks of ice, and ice sheets to place over water. Perhaps even an iced over water brush that can be both deep and shallow, and this is something that animals could traverse or even swim into, like the Pyroraptor from Dominion. The free update DLC species for the is a relatively simple one. But also a Cretaceous animal, the Monolophosaurus, a species that I think is exciting, but also an easier animal to implement alongside a DLC of this size. A feature I'd like to suggest for this update is working bridges and elevated attractions such as treetop grazers that allow guests to walk up onto a boardwalk where they can feed sauropods. The bridges could work as a basic bridge module that is stretched from either side of a canyon or river and then is just connected by a path on either side, and guests would be able to walk onto it, look off the sides of it, and the bridge just becomes an efficient tool in increasing guest transport around parks. Giving them the ability to have bends would make them more dynamic, and then the rest of the bridge is built by the player. In July comes the return of the shark-toothed lizard, the Carcharodontosaurus. Now, the Jurassic World Evolution design doesn't represent the animal as faithfully as it could, and it could have a more accurate skull shape, lose the spines, and have the opportunity to have some really vibrant colours. Something inspired by the Operation Genesis Carcharodontosaurus would be pretty cool. In August, I thought it would be good to bring back the Polacanthus to share habitats with the Iguanodon and the wetland pack's Hypsilophodon. The fall DLC of 2027 this time is set in Africa with the Africa Pack, adding several scenery species inspired by various African cultures and architectural styles, and along with 3 amazing species from the Dark Continent. The first of which is the Lurdosaurus, an iguanodont that would have fit well in the recent Wetlands pack, but it could make a welcome appearance in this pack as a semi-aquatic herbivore that could potentially run along the bottom of the water to give it some differentiated behaviour from other semi-aquatic animals, and feed on the aquatic plants that lie below. The second species is an animal that has received some recent new material attributed to it, the Spicomelis, a thyreophorans from the Middle Jurassic period of Morocco, that is adorned with enormous modified osteoderms that have formed into spikes, that any predator would do well to avoid, potentially making this animal a species that could skewer threats onto its spikes, that stay there for a while and then deteriorate over time until the body disappears, sort of like an animal cacti. It would also be an interesting creature next to the other thyreophorans in the game. Finally, another crocodiliform, the mighty Sarcosuchus, a species found not just in Africa but also South America during the early Cretaceous, and would be a formidable predator to have in riverine habitats overlooking other species from the Tegama beds of Niger, such as Ouranosaurus, Suchomimus, and the Lurdosaurus too. The free update could introduce the only other African species from the previous game left to reintroduce, the Nigersaurus, a small sauropod with a wide jaw, perfect for grazing rather than browsing, and it is also from the Tegama beds where Sarcosuchus also ruled. So it's a big get together, sort of a reunion. However, the main focus of this update would be combat, making fights less of a dramatic, drawn-out event and more realistic, gritty and random, with a few features and creatures having special film-inspired fight sequences such as Giganotosaurus and T-Rex, Giganotosaurus and Therizinosaurus, Sinoceratops and Carnotaurus, etc. But making the fights more random and not having an obvious winner in the fight would keep the battles interesting, as you'd never know who wins. And herbivores wouldn't be such soft targets next to the carnivores if it is random, introducing more dynamic battle scars too, like broken horns, lost teeth, slashes, punctures, and all sorts of other injuries that could be caused by fights with particular species would be cool additions, and really individualize animals that have a unique story. In October, the return of the Elasmosaurus would be a welcome one, considering this species could receive an alternate variant that is much more realistic and sporting a long, thinner neck with a small head that has clear eyes with no spines around the head, with rounded flippers and perhaps a small tail fluke. Another favourite, largely recognised from Walking with Dinosaurs, and what was the most accurate ceratopsian before Evolution 3's Lokiceratops, was the Taurosaurus, with its long brown horns, large round frill, and ability to take on much larger predators than itself. We now cover one of my most anticipated DLCs to cap off 2027, the Triassic Species Pack, with a few fan favourites from the series Walking with Dinosaurs, as well as some other Triassic oddities. First up is the iconic sauropodomorph, Plateosaurus, one of the largest Triassic herbivores and one of the best known, and one that would certainly diversify the sauropod roster. Then we have possibly the star of this pack, the Postosuchus, not quite the slow quadrupedal predator it was once thought to be. 5 meters long and with a bipedal stance, it is much faster and would be an agile ambush predator that could give many small dinosaurs a nasty surprise. The second herbivore in this pack is the huge Dicynodont Lysoecia, one of the largest of this group and found on the floodplains of Triassic Poland. Its great size would make it a formidable prey item for many of the game's predators. The final species is another semi-aquatic, with the largest getting to 5 meters or so in length. It is Tanystropheus. Now, it may not be as big as many of the other animals in the lagoons, and certainly not as deadly, but it is a peculiar and unique animal that would be pretty cool to see in lagoons alongside Nothosaurus, Ichthyosaurus, and Shonisaurus. Speaking of which, Shonisaurus would be arriving in this update to complete the Triassic roster and bring back its beautiful skins, and I'm certainly curious to see what the babies would look like. The main feature of this update would be new feeders, such as a squid feeder for the lagoons, or a cow and a crane to better recreate Jurassic Park, and giving carnivores a different method of feeding. The same for the deer feeder, a much larger live prey item that even the Therizinosaurus wants to get a piece of. And finally, a termite mound for some of the smaller and more adaptable dinosaurs, such as the Coelophysis, Troodon, Pachycephalosaurs, small dromaeosaurs, Ornithomimids, Oviraptor, Compy, Taco, Moros, and even the Plateosaurus in the Triassic Species Pack. Now on to the third year of support, 2028, and the year that would reintroduce the last of the DLC species from Evolution 2, as there are simply not that many base game species left at this point. And it would probably be best to start the year off with a big animal, that being the Alamosaurus, a big species for a big start of the year. Then to the return of Draco Rex, a dinosaur that could have been modified as a juvenile Stigi Murloc for this game, but it would be interesting to see this one return. A DLC idea that wasn't explored in Jurassic World Evolution 2 was a flying species pack, so Evolution 3 could certainly take the opportunity to add 4 diverse pterosaurs to the game, as well as some improvements to this group of animals in the free update. This pack includes the titan that is Hatzegopteryx, which I think could potentially be sized as a halfway point between the Dominion Quetz and the Thanatos Dracon, with an accurate wingspan of about 12 meters, or possibly at the same size as the Quetz, if you wanted to give the Quetz something that it can compete with. There is also Nyctosaurus, a well-known pterosaur with a 2-meter wingspan, but a prominent pronged head crest. Then we have Thalassodromeus, a medium-sized pterosaur that would have a wingspan of about 5 meters, just shy of the wingspan of Pteranodon, which is estimated around 6 meters. But both it and Hatzegopteryx I know have been getting fairly popular from Path of Titans, but I feel like both animals were also popular before then, and so given that they are their own animals and not one entity owns the rights to a species, I think they're safe to be included. Then our final animal is the diminutive Neurognathus, a species that couldn't fit into the Rebirth DLC, as that would just be too many animals for one DLC to include and for Frontier to work on in a small space of time, so I thought of introducing it here instead. Sporting a wingspan of only half a meter, it certainly isn't huge. This update would arrive with the returning Australovenator, a popular request to return and easily one of the best Australian species in Jurassic World Evolution 2. The second bonus of this update is many big features that will have been covered by this time, and so a new variant to add to the game would be great. And possibly the most requested after the Lost World Morangisaurus is the Jurassic World website Baryonyx, and it would certainly give anyone who isn't a fan of the canonical Baryonyx which is a lot of people, a great alternative that has an existing design for inspiration for the in-game model. A second website species would be the Microceratus, receiving a design inspired by what is seen on the website as well, as though the Dominion design is cute, it isn't the best representation of that animal. This update could also focus on pterosaurs quite a bit, expanding their terrestrial locomotion to feature social interactions and allow them to run after prey, particularly the Azhdarchids, which were largely terrestrial hunters. Allowing them to feed from meat feeders would be good as well. And this would also allow us, the pterosaurs, to fight on the ground, particularly animals like Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx that, as seen in Prehistoric Planet, can be rather ferocious on the ground. Even allowing them to attack other dinosaurs would make such colossal flyers more of a threat, especially attacking dromaeosaurs, snatching baby dinosaurs, and challenging large carnivores. Following the arrival of the Nyctosaurus in the Flying Species Pack just before, the return of Barbaridactylus would be welcome, with an alternative variant sporting a pronged crest and also missing the extra fingers on the wings, as for those who don't know, Nyctosaurid pterosaurs only have the one wing finger. They don't actually have those other fingers that help other pterosaurs move around on the ground, so removing those would be accurate for the animal, as well as giving a shorter, more curved beak and pycnofibers across its body. In May, the return of the Stegosaurus, a small species that was requested for so long as it was an animal part of the original Jurassic Park, but probably wouldn't be able to do too much other than also being an owl to feed on the termite mound from earlier, as even though it was requested for so long, it doesn't really do anything that a compy couldn't do. A DLC that I previously wasn't too excited for, but now having put it together, I can't wait for it. The European Species Pack, which contains 4 species iconic of various European ecosystems from particularly the Jurassic period. We have Portugal and North America's own Torvosaurus, a large megalosaurid theropod, a group that particularly thrived in Europe, with the Torvosaurus guernii dominating Portugal when it was an isolated island during the late Jurassic. Then our herbivore is the Dacentrurus, a species discovered before the synonymous Miragaia, which has a more recognizable name due to popularity in various dinosaur games, but at least to me it would be more appropriate to use the valid genus, but the name Miragaia could still be used. But this species is distinct from other stegosaurs with its long neck that it could use to great effect, browsing low-hanging branches that any Stegosaurus or Kentrosaurus could only dream of reaching. Then we have the Thyreophorans Solidosaurus, an armoured dinosaur from early Jurassic England, covered from head to tail in osteoderms. Unlike later relatives, the Stegosaurs and the Ankylosaurs, Solidosaurus was capable of walking on both 4 legs and on 2. The final species in this pack is easily the largest, Leedsichthys, a giant fish that cruised the seas across much of Europe during the mid to late Jurassic, using its cavernous jaws to engulf smaller organisms like shoals of fish and plankton, and would certainly make a breathtaking addition to the lagoons, especially considering they may enjoy the social life. In the June update alongside the European Species Pack, I thought it was only fitting to include one of the first dinosaurs discovered in Europe, the Megalosaurus, which has a fairly odd design in Jurassic World Evolution 2, but this animal could also arrive with a more accurate variant that resembles the species a lot more faithfully. Jaeolopterus returns for July, a smaller Neurognathid that can act as a fluffier alternative to Rebus and Neurognathus. The early Cretaceous Stegosaur Werasaurus returns for August, sporting the previously proposed rounded plates that are now believed to have been more rigid, more akin to the plates of Stegosaurus, so it could potentially have that updated, possibly for the male of the species. Now onto a pack that is very much Prehistoric Planet inspired, taking 4 species from the 3 arid episodes of the series, the Desert Species Pack. The first animal is the Alvarosaurid Mononychus, a small theropod known for its large single claw on either hand, and was likely covered in feathers that would have shielded it from the harsh desert sun. Rajosaurus was an abelosaurid from the Indian subcontinent during the late Cretaceous, and when India was an island lying south of the Eurasian supercontinent, it became the island's top predator. It was slightly smaller than Carnotaurus, but a little larger than Majungasaurus, so it would act as a nice middle ground abelosaurid to well represent the family. The third dinosaur of this pack is Yacapil, a small armored dinosaur from the Candeleros formation of Argentina, sharing its realm with the mighty Giganotosaurus. But this small bipedal herbivore is covered from head to toe in osteoderms, being one of the most armored small dinosaurs ever discovered, and would certainly give it a distinct silhouette next to other small herbivores. The fourth and final animal of the pack is Australia's great lizard, the Megalania, a giant monitor lizard that could potentially reach 6 meters in length and be one of the top predators of the continent during the Pleistocene. With the added adaptation of a venomous bite, it would be a creature that not a lot of dinosaurs would see coming, especially with powerful claws, sharp teeth, well-muscled forelimbs and a mighty baseball bat of a tail. It would be a formidable adversary and a stellar addition to any park. Complementing the desert species pack is the return of another Australian species in the charming Minmi, a small ankylosaurian with osteoderms dotted across its flanks and a powerful bite any unwary predator would do best to avoid. Returning from the depths is the Styxosaurus in October, easily one of the best elasmosaurs from the previous game, especially with its bioluminescent patterning. In November, the return of the controversial Hyangosaurus, an adorable little stegosaur from China, but one that hasn't had the best reception as of its inclusion in Jurassic World Evolution 2's Deluxe Edition, so hopefully this little guy can avoid the same mistakes again. Ending off 2028 could be another non-dinosaur focused DLC, the Permian Species Pack, introducing 4 incredible animals that are famous from this unforgotten time in Earth's history, as many of these animals were casualties of the deadliest extinction event of all time, the Great Dying. Hitting the ground running is one of my favourite prehistoric animals, the Inostrancevia, a giant gorgonopsid that dominated what is now Siberia and South Africa, a formidable predator with ferocious saber teeth, perfect for dispatching prey. Next is Dimetrodon's own sailback neighbour and preferred breakfast, the Edaphosaurus, a herbivorous pelycosaur that had perhaps a more prominent sail than Dimetrodon, with it being more rounded than its hunter. Thirdly is Inostrancevier's primary source of prey, the armoured Scutosaurus, a parasaur, a group known as the parareptiles that diverged from the main reptilian branch, likely in the late Carboniferous, to then diversify into a range of forms. But this Scutosaurus was one of the largest herbivores in its ecosystem, and certainly one of the most well protected, and not an easy meal for Inostrancevia. The final animal dwelled in the Permian oceans, the Helicoprion, part of an extinct group of cartilaginous fish known as the Eugeniodontiforms, that are well known for their tooth whorls, and in Helicoprion's case, a lower jaw that resembled a circular saw, which it would have used to dispatch various prey in the ocean, like other fish and squid. This great beast remains as one of the largest aquatic predators of the Permian, with a head similar in size to T-Rex. The final species to return is the now lost canon animal, Tarbosaurus, a large tyrannosaur with a fairly cartoony design in the episode of Camp Cretaceous it was featured in, and so could be the last animal to receive an alternate variant alongside it, giving players a more accurate large tyrannosaur, but it could still retain the cool sound effects and maybe a much smaller line of spines running down the back. But that is all for this DLC speculation video. It covers 3 years of potential future for Jurassic World Evolution 3, as I do feel like this game has a long future ahead of it, and these are certainly not all the DLCs that we could receive, as there's a lot of other animals on the wish list that has been formulated by the Jurassic World Evolution Discord that could certainly be added. But let me know what you think of these DLCs. Which DLC was your favourite? Which animal do you want to see added to Jurassic World Evolution 3 the most? Leave those thoughts down in the comments. Like if you enjoyed the video, and yeah, I will see you in the next one.